What do you think about the Crusades? 'Cause there's a story that I mean, I know what I think I know what you think about the Crusades. I know what I do, but um, so I've been teaching 12th grade
Yeah.
theology,
Right.
and one thing that stood out was they are fully indoctrinated with this idea that Christian imperialism has been kind of a cancer. So they might
major
try to
force.
separate the spirituality of the church,
Right.
but they are very, I would say the majority of them very much have ingrained that the church itself has been a net negative. And maybe there's this spiritual, like gospel oriented kind of good news that you're forgiven. That might be some kind of good thing, but it gets clouded by the church.
Yeah, Jesus versus the church.
And the
Jesus
Crusades would be an
versus
example.
religion. Crusades being an egregious example of something found throughout church history, they think, perhaps. Part of the issue with the Crusades is just this imbibing of assumptions. So one assumption that we imbibe is that they invaded territory that didn't belong to them. And therefore it's just obviously bad because they're foreign invaders. That doesn't take account of the historical understanding of both sides of the Crusades that concern ancient assumptions about to whom the land of Palestine, as it would have been called at the time, Palestine belongs. The Christians, and remember that the appeal for Western help comes from a weakening Eastern Christian empire, the Byzantines.
They were kind of taken over first by the...
They had lost so much ground to the Muslims already by the 1000s.
Okay.
Right? That, because Islam is overtaking what we call the Middle East, what they would have called most of the Byzantine Empire by the 800s, 900s. So this is very difficult, especially for Americans, because Americans tend to have very small, short historical memories. So the idea that you would operate on the basis of something that was hundreds of years in the past and be like, this is actually our land, is foreign to us. So we think, well, if they're there now, they must have always been there. Therefore, it's bad to invade. The Christians thought of themselves as those to whom the protection of the sites of the Holy Land had been commended, especially by the Christian victory over paganism, not Islam, paganism from the time of Constantine in the 4th century. So they think of it as taking back what had been theirs, similar to the way that the Spanish will talk about Reconquista when they're pushed to the northern fringes of the Iberian Peninsula by Muslim armies, and then over the course of hundreds and hundreds of years, more than half a millennium, gradually retake that territory for a Christian Spain rather than a Muslim Al-Andalus. So that's how they think about the Crusades, right? Conversely, Islam doesn't actually see a problem with the thing that the Christians are doing in the sense that modern people do, where like using force to accomplish ideological goals is always bad. The Muslims, of course, don't think that because that's what they do.
So they're not offended by
they're
this
not
in
offended.
The way that a white suburbanite is offended by it.
Yes, right. So they would be offended by what they see as the idolatry of Christianity, because the Muslims look at Christianity the way Christians look at Mormonism, which is that it's polytheistic. That's the way that Muslims look at us. That the Trinity is just covert polytheism. So they have a problem with that.
But they say you've got your ideology and it's bad.
Yeah.
We've got our ideology, it's good.
Yeah.
And it's completely fair that we're fighting over this.
Yeah.
We're not offended. You're doing the same thing we're doing.
Right.
This is a battle.
Yeah. Modern people struggle to understand that the vast majority of human beings throughout space and time have not thought of themselves primarily as victims. That being a victim of someone else's aggression, rudeness, whatever, is the place of greater moral honor. We tend to phrase almost everything in terms of victimization and who was victimized, and what happens then is that the way that human beings sin against each other gets masked because you have to have a clear victim and a clear villain in order to tell that story if it's going to be all about victimization. Muslims are not going to structure things that way. They're going to structure it in terms of the conquest of unbelief, because the whole world is separated into the house of Islam and the house of unbelief. It's a completely bifurcated world, and this would be the advance of the house of unbelief by they call them the Franks, because some majority of, especially in the early Crusades, majority of the Crusaders come from France or French lands. The Frankish pagans are overtaking the house of Islam, and we have to defend against that. But they're not categorically upset by or disgusted by or framing the issue in the same terms that we do today. So then the irony is that it's somewhat like Western leftists defending Islamic forces in modern day Israel / Palestine. The people they're defending don't want, I mean, they might want the help, or they might want the money, or they might want the political support in a Western country, but they don't need the victimization critique. That's not how they think about the world. So you're not actually agreeing with the people that you're seeking to defend by saying the Crusades were evil.